If there was one thing I would recommend to anybody to slow down aging would be to skip a meal or two a day. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have to live well. You can go out. I go to restaurants. I eat regular food. I try to be as healthy as possible. But I've gone from skipping breakfast most of my life now to skipping lunch as well. And I have my physique back that I had when I was 20. I feel 20 mentally. I'm much sharper. I don't feel tired anymore. I sleep well. So I'm a huge fan of the 1 meal a day thing. But I've managed to do 1 meal a day. So if I can do that, seriously, anybody can do that. Don't try to do it all at once. You can't go from snacking and eating 3 meals a day to what I do. Work your way up to it, but also compensate with drinking. If you like tea, if you like coffee, put some milk in it. That's fine. You can fill your stomach up with liquids. You know, I power through the day. I definitely don't feel tired. I don't have a lag anymore. But also give it at least 2 weeks. There's a habit as well. Having something in your mouth, chewing, feeling that fullness. You can break that habit, and within 2-3 weeks, you'll have done it.
Even today, I get criticized from colleagues saying age reversal. How can that be possible? Well, what we're looking for in my lab is information that tells the cell which genes to bundle up again that have become opened up over time. And that is going to be the source of the backup copy. Exactly how that is arranged, you might say, well, what is that? What is the information that tells the cell how to be young again? I don't know what it is. I just can tell you, I know that it's there because we can tap into it with our experiments using the Yamanaka factors and some chemicals now. This is probably why people are skeptical about my use of the term age reversal, because they're not seeing the results that I see in my lab. We clearly see that aging is reversible. And these new discoveries are really powerful, more powerful than anything I've seen before.
You mentioned supplements you take, a gram of resveratrol. A gram.
It is a gram of resveratrol, whatever I pour out into my yogurt.
And about a gram of nicotinamide.
NMN.
And that's also in your yogurt as well?
No, I can just take that as a capsule in the morning, down it with a cup of coffee.
Okay.
And that's a pretty big boost, I find, physiologically. Those 3 things, with caffeine included. So a bit of scientific background. These sirtuin genes that we discovered, first in yeast cells when I was at MIT, and then in animals as I moved to Harvard in the 2000s. And one of my first postdocs, actually literally my first postdoc, Chaim Cohen, published a great paper just a couple of months ago and found that turning on the sirtuin 6 gene, remember there's 7, number 6 gene is very potent. It extended the lifespan dramatically of mice that he engineered, both males and females, which is great. So what you want to do is naturally boost the activity of these sirtuins. They are genes, but they also make proteins. That's what genes typically make, or encode. And then those proteins take care of the body in many different ways, as we've discussed. So how do you turn on these genes and make the proteins they make even more active? You want to rev up that system. So exercise will do it. Fasting will do it. What about supplementation? Well, the first activator of the sirtuins that we discovered that acts on the enzyme to make it do a better job of cleaning up the body and protecting was resveratrol. We looked at thousands of different molecules, eventually tens of thousands. And the one that was the best was resveratrol in the dish. And then we gave it to little organisms, worms, and then flies and mice, eventually humans. And we saw that it activated that enzyme. So resveratrol is one way to activate it. And you can think of it as the accelerator pedal on a car. It revs it up. But there's something else that the sirtuins need to work, and that's NAD. NAD is a really small molecule, little chemical in the body that we need for life. It's used by the body for chemical reactions, 400 different reactions in the body, and without it, you're dead within seconds. You need NAD. The problem that we've seen is that NAD levels decline as you become obese, as you get older, if you don't ever get hungry. And the body not only doesn't make enough of it, it's chewing it up as well. There's an enzyme called CD38 that Eric Verdin over at UCSF chews up, he's now at the Buck Institute in California, chews up NAD as you get older. So it's a double whammy. You don't make as much, you chew it up, which is really bad because what we've shown in my lab, and so have others, is that NAD levels are really important for keeping those sirtuin defenses at a youthful level. And you can give a lot of resveratrol, but if you don't have the fuel, you're basically accelerating a car that doesn't have enough gas. So you want to do both, and that's what I do. I take a precursor to NAD called NMN, and the body uses that to make the NAD molecule in one step. And so I know from measuring dozens of human beings, that if you take NMN for the time period that I do, I've been taking it for years, but if you take it for about 2 weeks, you'll on average, double your NAD levels in the blood. Okay, that's not public information. That's from clinical trials that are not yet published over the last 2 years.
You can ask my friends. Sometimes I have to temper it a little because I'm like a mouse on oxygen running around the cage a little bit too much. But it works for me. It helps with, I believe it helps me with jet lag as well, or a lack of sleep. I've got 3 kids, so sometimes I don't sleep well. I know you have a young one, so you know what that's like.
Thankfully, I'm starting to sleep well now, but sleep is really important for aging as well.
My diet 2 or 3 days a week was a cheese board and a couple of glasses of red wine. And I've looked at my blood biochemistry, and I'm actually now younger and healthier than I've ever been since I've been measuring it over a decade. Now it's more like 14 years. And I can plot various parameters, testosterone, glucose, the list goes on, inflammation, blood type, blood cell composition. And for most of those markers, I'm better than a 20-year-old for health. And I think a lot of that's due to my new diet that I've adopted, because I can just see things getting better and better over time. First thing I cut out was a lot of carbohydrates. I used to eat bread every day. I would just if I ate something, it would be on toast. Okay, that's my life. I cut that out and have found immediate improvements in my biochemistry levels, particularly my glucose levels. The next thing I cut out was meat. I worked towards a Mediterranean diet, had fish, and eventually now I'm no meat, and that improved my numbers even better. Cholesterol, triglycerides all came down. But that was very important, was the cutting out meat. And it's not just the protein, it's also the fat that comes along with the steak and whatever that I was eating. And then the third change was the dairy. I did that just to see what would happen. I figured it wouldn't matter. I'm not allergic to dairy. I'm not lactose intolerant. But it did have an effect. It made things even better. And what I think is going on, Shane, is that I was eating a large amount of protein, not just fat, but eggs and all that stuff. And now that I have less protein, I think that mTOR pathway that's really important for longevity in animals and probably people is really kicking in a way that had never done so before.
The epigenome are the control systems that tell gene A to be switched on and gene B to be switched off. And the way the cell does that, in a simplistic sense, is it wraps up the DNA or loops it out in a loop that's accessible to the cell and the machinery of the cell, the proteins. And so what the DNA isn't just a flailing strand of a long chemical 6 foot long in a cell. It's actually mostly bundled up with little loops where the genes can be accessed, but most of it's bundled up tightly so it cannot be accessed. That system is called the epigenome, and it changes depending on how you live and how old you are and how much stress and biological accidents happen. But when you're born, basically, you've got these beautiful patterns of bundles and loops of DNA. That's the epigenome. Now, what was tricky was to, first of all, show that those loops and bundles become untangled, and that's causing aging. That was this paper I was telling you about. That's what we think is going on. And then the next challenge was, how do you take that DNA strand that's now lost that pattern of bundles and loops and might now be all mostly loops, and now the cell's just reading the wrong gene? How do you possibly get those structures to go back to where they came? And that was why it was almost ludicrous to suggest that it was possible.
Well, I don't like plants. I'm now learning how to enjoy plants, but for me, they were a side dish. But here's the thing. There's a lot of debate, especially on social media, about meat versus plants. I would love meat to be lifespan extending. That would be heaven. But it's not. You just look at those populations and people that live a long time. They are generally smaller, women who don't eat much, who eat vegetarian. I mean, that's the fact. We can debate it all day, but there are these scientific facts that we have to pay attention to. But what do? I base my exercise on the scientific literature, which has shown that maintaining muscle mass is very important for a number of reasons. The two main ones are you want to maintain your hormone levels. I'm an older male, losing my testosterone and muscle mass over time. And by exercising, I will maintain that and have. In fact, I probably haven't had a body like this since I was 20. So that's one of the benefits of having this lifestyle. So running for 10 minutes, losing your breath is great. Being hungry once in a while is great. Being hot in a sauna has benefits. Even being cold, we think, can help. We call these concepts, well, overall, they're called hormesis, Hormes, MESIS. And the idea is that our bodies need a little bit of perceived adversity. Think of it this way, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And what's happening, we've discovered, comes back to these longevity genes that I mentioned earlier. We work on a set of 7 genes called sirtuins. There are others, but these ones control the scratches, and they control your body's energy and fat content, your brain, Alzheimer's even, how fast that progresses. And here's the key thing. When you exercise, when you're hungry, these genes come on. They protect the body. They give you longer life, we think, and certainly health, increased health. But when you're sitting down, you don't do any of that stuff. They just say, hey, times are good. We don't need to work hard. Your body will not protect itself unless it actually thinks there's a threat to survival. So that's hormesis, and it's super important.